Hello, everyone. It has been quite a while since I created a video, and I thought that it was about time that I tried to do something for once. One of the things that I had been looking for in the last while is looking for some kind of like ASMR podcast, I guess is the best way to describe it. Sleep along, something to listen to while you are trying to fall asleep. Just someone talking in the background while trying to, snooze for the night. And I was having a weird time finding it. Now, mind you, I was trying to look for this while in the middle of the night when I am already scatterbrained and my insomnia is pulling me in all directions, left, right, center, and every other direction that you could possibly think of. So perhaps I just simply wasn't writing in the right words. My Google foo, as some people have called it, is not particularly strong, so I thought, well, what if I just try to do that for other people? Even if it turns out that it does exist, I can still potentially provide that for others and hope that it can provide some kind of comfort or relaxation or distraction for those who are listening along or watching. I'm attempting to make sure that there is some sort of visual component to this just in case. It is mostly just myself moving around slightly and talking, though not moving around too much. I don't want to make too much noise. I'm currently holding a towel in my hands because I have a tendency to talk with my hands and my joints tend to pop and crack because that's just the life that I live. So I once saw a recommendation that if you need to record and you tend to fidget with things, to hold on to something so that you are actively able to keep your hands in place while still doing what you need to do. So I've grabbed a dish towel. It is currently sitting in my lap, and I am just holding on to it in order to attempt to not unintentionally fill your ears with the sound of fingers popping and wrists popping, etc. Because not a lot of people enjoy that. In fact, some people really don't enjoy that. Maybe I shouldn't have even mentioned it. Well, too late now. But yeah, I'm going to try to make these every now and then whenever I find the time or the energy to do so. I will be talking about things that I am personally interested in for the most part, just things that are on my mind. They're usually nerdy or geeky, etc. As I am somebody who is nerdy and geeky, somebody who enjoys video games and role playing and TTRPGs or tabletop role playing games for those who don't know what that means. And everybody has their little thing that they enjoy, and I like learning new TTRPGs. Like at the moment, I am relearning, or I am learning rather, uh, Vanguard, or not Vanguard. Will, what are you talking about? You're speaking nonsense. It's Vagabond, and also Lancer, which are two very different TTRPGs. And one thing that I do want to do is if this idea, this series, does end up getting a little bit of traction, I would not mind if people had specific topics that they would like me to talk about in some way, shape, or form. I am, despite not being as mentioned earlier, I'm not particularly amazing at Google Foo, but I do enjoy a good bit of research. As said, I do enjoy just diving into certain types of topics, especially TTRPGs. They pluck a certain chord in my brain that I just enjoy. Like, as somebody who really enjoys stories, I love to look at ways to take stories and put them out in a way that allows other people to join in. And TTRPGs are a great example of that. Like, I have been a dungeon master slash game master for several games, many of them unfortunately not to completion, usually due to my own anxieties, because it's a lot of pressure to be somebody who tells the story and is the world and is all the NPCs and the enemies and the friends, etc. Though I'm trying to learn to not be that guy. At the end of the day, improv is a very important skill when it comes to this. You should be able to build your story and your world in a way that is modular to some degree so that your players can freely explore and express themselves while you can still direct the story in the way that you would like it to go, within reason, of course. And I really enjoy the way that Vagabond's system works right now from the bit that I've read into it. Like, I like the close, near, and far system so that it's a little bit more ambiguous where people are. Because in some games, Dungeons and Dragons is a good example of this, where you really need to be able to know if people are like right next to you or within X feet of you, etc. The close, near, far system is a little bit more flexible in that regard. It's just like, oh, well, is where the group is in a fight and your witch is like, oh, this spell requires them to at least be near who is all near me. And it's like, well, these 3 goblins are near you, but this 4th one is far. And it's like, okay, so this can potentially affect 3 goblins, for instance. Or if they're in a scenario where there is a penalty for somebody being close to you, you can be like, all right, is anybody close? It's like, no, they are all near or far from you. It's like, okay, so I'm in no danger. Now, mind you, you can still use a grid or X system for Vagabond, and I'm sure in a lot of cases it is actually recommended to do so. But systems like that, I think, are nice for when you simply can't do that. In situations where you can't have visuals on hand, it's just the theater of the mind rather than the visuals of miniatures and graph paper or like Roll20, which is a website that allows you to create maps and actually place them and move tokens around and show a bit more how the world works. And obviously for a lot of people those visuals are very helpful, because why wouldn't it? If you know where you are, well, you know what you can do. But in cases where just you don't have that option, whatever the reason may be, you can still play within it without having to worry as much about it. And also, I like how would you describe that? The favor and hinder system in the game, where you can gain favor through various ways, such as, I believe, luck, or there are just bonuses, or I guess boons and banes, if you will, in the system that I think is really neat. And they're simple, like they're when you are trying to do something in the game that requires a roll, it will be a 20-sided dice towards a skill that you have. And all you need to do is beat the skill. So let's say that you have, let's say, a 10 in crafting, just for simplicity's sake. And the more skill you have in the skill, the lower the number will be. So if you have a 10 in crafting, it means that you are relatively skilled in it. Whereas if you had a 12, you would be slightly less skilled in it, because the idea is that you're always trying to beat it. And the way that hinders and favors work is it adds an extra 6-sided die to your roll. So let's say that you are trying to craft something in the heat of the moment and it needs to be done right now. And you try to do the roll and it's a 10 and you roll a 9 and you're like, well, dang, it has to meet or exceed. Dang it, I have failed. But I have favor, so I can roll that one 6-sided die. And in that particular situation, it's incredible because no matter what, you succeed, right? You get that extra +1, so you bring it up to a 10, which means you have met the 10 and you win. And I just like little things like that, I like that Vagabond is built in ways that lets you approach things creatively. So the stats in the game are might, dexterity, awareness, reason, and luck. And I like that a lot because it means that luck is a stat, a resource pool that you can work with. So theoretically, you could build a character that is not particularly good at anything, but they are exceptionally lucky. And through that luck pool, you can, through a bit of chance, turn yourself into a character that looks very competent. And whenever I see things like that in games, I always really enjoy it. Just the instant idea of just like, oh, you could be the lucky fool of a character. The character that is clumsy and not particularly menacing and doesn't really have a lot of awareness about them, but just for some reason, they always just stumble their way through it and come out the other side better than they started. I like stuff like that. I don't know what causes me to be drawn to that. I mean, my best friend sometimes tells me that I was born with I was born with a horseshoe up my butt. The idea that there's always just this weird luck that I have. So maybe I'm just drawn towards it just simply because it's something similar to what I experience, where I don't consider myself particularly skilled at things, but somehow things tend to work out in a weird way. And, maybe I just relate to that. Who knows? But I also really enjoy, and yeah, I'm going to be talking about Vagabond for a bit because that's just kind of my little hyper focus at the moment, I like that the perk system. And now, mind you, this is pretty similar to a lot of other tabletop role-playing games where there are, in some places they're called feats, or talents, or traits. They are the idea that your character develops some kind of a skill or habit or talent. And what I like about Vagabond is In a lot of TTRPGs, if you want to make a min-max character, you're kind of going down a very particular route. And I think that that would still be the case with Vagabond. But Vagabond is more built around the idea that you can have a strong character with strong perks, but you have them, or you are, because the perks are all quite strong, allowing you to be a little bit more flavorful while still being strong. And I like that. I like it when games let you put personality into your choices rather than just, like, in Dungeons and Dragons, for instance, in 3rd edition especially, if you were going to play a melee fighter, you basically were going to take power attack. Like, that's just, you were just going to take power attack. If you didn't, you were objectively worse as a melee fighter in that situation. And then you would probably also take cleave afterwards, and then great cleave, but that's not as important. But I don't know. I haven't fully dived into all the perks in Vagabond, but they seem interesting and they seem neat. I like the flavor and the, I don't know. It makes the story part of my brain just start rolling forward. I already created an alchemist for myself. A friend of mine would like to play around with the system, so I figured, well, you know what, let's try making an alchemist. And the alchemist is a very neat character, like, on its own, like, in terms of class. Like, their whole concept is you just make alchemical things on the fly. You know, like, you're instead of what you would think is like a tinkerer to some degree, you're making bombs and acids and torches and potions just on the fly, just suddenly, you know, like, in a panic, you know that you know, like a pinch of this and a splash of that, and suddenly you have, you know, alchemical fire, or a potion of healing, or a smoke bomb, or God knows what else, an adhesive, an acid. Just, you just know that. You're just somebody who has experienced enough in terms of tinkering in a lab that you just know off the cuff, like, yeah, if I put this and this into a bottle and shake it and then throw it at someone, that bottle is going to explode on contact, or it's going to, upon contact, it's going to produce like an adhesive. Just all of a sudden, just that whole area just becomes a sticky mess that's just like locks people into place, etc. They're not defensive in any way, shape, or form. Like, if they get into melee, they are in a lot of danger. But if they're not, if they're allowed to run rampant and just skitter around and, you know, pop in and out of places, just like hucking smoke bombs and fire and all the other things, like combat wise, I think they're very neat. And, like, even just in roleplay, they're neat. You know, like, what's not to enjoy about an alchemist? There's lots of different directions you can go, anywhere from the humble, you know, philosopher's stone seeking cleric, to the mad scientist, to the eccentric inventor. You know, we can think of, I can't remember his name off the cuff, but from Legend of Korra, you know, Julie do the thing. You know, you can immediately take something like that, or you can take, I can't remember his name as well, but from Overwatch, you know, the man who's just full of explosions. Like, all the, like, there's so many different archetypes just pop into mind when you think about, like, an alchemist. And I think I'm gonna have fun playing him. Oh, the other thing that I forgot to mention, actually, that I really like about Vagabond is its magic system. Its magic system is incredibly fascinating. I really hope that this is helping people sleep because I know I've definitely talked an ear off to people in my life like this, and I can see them nodding off because they're like, sure will. Yep, alchemical stuff. Eh, that's very interesting. Wake me up when you're done. When you're done talking about this, and I'll pretend like I was interested. But the magic system in Vagabond is very, very interesting. Um, it revolves around the idea that you have spells and mana. And it's very different from something like Dungeons and Dragons, which I'm going to keep using as a center point because a lot of people know Dungeons and Dragons, or at least kind of aware of Dungeons and Dragons to some degree. Dungeons and Dragons magic is very around the idea of levels. You know, you have your cantrips, which are spells that you can always use, but they're like the weakest of the spells. You know, you have Firebolt, where you create a little ball of fire in your hand and you just go, yeah, and you hit a person with it, and they're like, oh no, a little bit of damage. Or you can do Acid Splash, or Light, where you can pick up a random object and turn it into a makeshift torch in the sense of that it just emanates. That's the word I'm looking for. That it emanates light. But then you have your level 1 spells, which actually eat spell slots. Ooh, getting a little bit more interesting. And then you have level 2 spell slots, which are later levels, and they have more dangerousness to it. You know, you go from Burning Hands. If we're going to keep going on the Firebolt, you go from Firebolt where you chuck a little, I think it's a 1 8-sided die damage. It might be 1 6-sided die. I believe it's 1 8-sided die. And then you go to Burning Hands, and I think it's 2d6 fire damage in a cone. Ooh, look at that. We're increasing our damage a little bit. But then you get to higher levels. I think it's level 3 that you get Fireball, or maybe it's level 4 that you get Fireball. But Fireball is a classic Dungeons and Dragons spell where you do this big, massive pull of fire. It's like 8 6-sided die worth of damage where you just take a spot and you just basically turn it into a small inferno for a split second. And Vagabond does it differently. The way that it kind of works is, imagine that you start by taking a bunch of cantrips, but you can expel or you can spend mana to enhance the spell. So let's say that you cast something like Frost, and you can be like, I target someone with Frost. So that doesn't cost any mana. You just do 1d6 or 1 6-sided die worth of frost damage, where you just kind of go, poof. It's kind of like Frostbite when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons. But you can expend mana to make it an AoE spell centered from you. So let's say that you're surrounded. You can go, I spend 1 mana, and now around me, I blast out a circle of ice. Just so now all of a sudden the people around you, presuming that you're surrounded, all take frost damage. Or you can have it that you can target it on someone, but it's an AoE. So you can, or an area of effect spell. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure that people who don't know these terms also get, the information that they need. So AoE is an area of effect spell. And you could make it that you target that group of goblins by targeting the center one and then turning it into an area of effect. So now when it hits, it actually explodes and hits a bunch of the critters around it. And then you can spend even more mana to make it a bigger area of effect. Or you can make it that the effect of the spell, in the case of Frost, is that it slows the opponent down. You can make it that it's continuous instead of for only one turn. So for one turn, they're chilled, and because they're so cold, they can't move as fast. Either the ice is weighing them down, or the frozenness is like stiffening their joints, and so they can't move as far. Whatever you decide to make it be. But you can make it that it lasts for more turns. So now, instead of that creature that you hit with frost, instead of them being slower for a turn, now they can be slow for 2 turns or 3 turns. Or potentially, depending on rolls, they could be just permanently slow for an extended period of time. And that's with a lot of the different spells. There's like gust and fire and ice and all these other things. And just as much as I haven't gotten a chance to really dive into the magic yet, it's really ends up letting the player become creative and just play around with it and be like, well, wait, I have this much mana, so I could make it a long-ranged area of effect continuous spell. Like, that'll eat all my mana for the day, but I could basically cast a fireball. The other thing that this system, the Vagabond system, does that I really, really like is, and sorry, I'm talking a little bit faster because when I get excited about stuff, I tend to talk faster. It's the ADHD. I apologize if I'm talking a little bit too fast for people, though I really, really hope that people are just enjoying themselves. But so I apologize for apologizing. But the other thing that I really like that this system uses that I don't really know any other systems that use is a continuation damage. And the way that it works is, let's use the Alchemist Fire for a second as an example. So if an alchemist creates an Alchemist Fire, which is essentially like a fire grenade to some degree, what happens is you can throw it at somebody and they'll take the damage, but every turn they will also take an extra 1 6-sided die worth of damage, and it's described in the rules as a CD6, the C as in the letter. And the rules to it are, as long as you don't roll a 1, every turn they will keep taking 1 6-sided die worth of damage. And the cool thing is that if you do roll a 1, it drops down to the next smallest dice. So for a 6-sided die, the next smallest one is a 4-sided die. So if you roll a 1, it takes 1 damage that turn, and it goes to a 1d4, or 1 4-sided dice. And if the next turn you roll another 1, the fire goes out. Like, it takes 1 damage and the fire goes out. And I think that that's really cool because Alchemist Fire makes me personally think about like Greek fire, which is the thing that we've never really figured out how it actually works, but it was this chemical fire that we learned how to make in like ancient Greek eras that supposedly just burned forever. Like, it was this dangerous material that was immensely successful when it came to defense and to like ship battles because, well, everything is made out of wood, right? If you can throw something onto a wooden structure that is in water that has a bunch of people on it, and you can ignite it using this material that seemingly burns continuously, it's very dangerous. And that's kind of how I see like alchemist's fire to some degree. But during the fight, the person's not just standing there, right? They're not just waiting for the fire to go out. They're running around. They're patting themselves down. Like other attacks are hitting them. So it only makes sense that there is the potential that the fire is being put out, even if it's like a burning tar of some kind, you know? It makes sense, and I really, really like that system. That system, if you can't tell by my enthusiasm, it really tickles my fancy. It's just, I like when there are new systems in tabletop role playing games that feel good. You know, it both makes the player feel strong because you're like, yeah, I did that. You know, like this big bad evil guy is now taking all this fire damage because I threw this sticky tar like firebomb at them. But also the system still makes sense because if other people are hitting the big bad evil guy, then it's like, well, they have the potential that every time that you roll that one for the damage, wouldn't it make sense that occasionally some of the fire goes out? You know, if he's getting smacked by blasts of ice magic, for instance, just for simplicity's sake, since we were on the topic earlier, just like, well, wouldn't it make sense that that's hitting the fire and some of the fire is going out? So if you rolled a one, it's like, oh, well, you know, that ice might have potentially done it. Or maybe in the midst of an attack, the big bad evil guy managed to pull one of the sleeves off his burning robe, you know? So the fire, sorry, I hit my table a little bit. I apologize. If it's too loud, I'll just remove the sound and yeah, but you know, then a portion of it, he's not taking that damage anymore. So maybe like his other sleeve is still burning, but the one isn't. So we can have a reduction in the damage. The other thing that I really enjoy in that regard too is, again, I'm speaking mostly from the Alchemist because that's the one that I've gotten to play around with the most, is you can make a bunch of different acids, and the one acid is an oxidizing acid. So it does damage to people because of course it does. We're all oxidizing in our own slow pace. But when someone throws an oxidization acid on a metal, you rust it. And the game has mechanics for that. So if you throw, let's say that somebody is fighting you with a longsword. So let's say that that does 1d6 damage. So one six-sided die damage. Just for simplicity's sake, I know that a lot of times the longsword usually does 1d8 damage, especially if you're two-handing it. It's okay. Just for simplicity's sake. This is me talking to me. I apologize again. But let's say that it's doing a 1d6 damage. And you manage to get one of these acid oxidizing concoctions on it. What will happen is the damage on the weapon, if it succeeds to hit, will be reduced by one damage dice. So it will go from a six-sided dice to a four-sided dice. And if you manage to hit it again, the weapon will dissolve. Now, there is an argument to be made that it should probably go down to a two-sided dice, aka a coin, but that's how the system works, at least as written. Could there be a homebrew to that? Sure. But I still think it's a really neat system. So if there's the big bad guy who's just absolutely just, you know, using a giant axe and is just cleaving through your fighter, and he's just like, guys, I'm gonna be real with you, I'm feeling pretty bad right now. It's just like, well, what if I spend my turn making it that the big bad guy's weapon does less damage? Just its top end has just been reduced. Let's say it does one 12-sided die. Now it's a 10-sided die. Will it still do a lot of damage? Potentially. But has it been reduced permanently? Yes. And I think that's a great system. It works the same with armor. If the armor is made of metal, you can reduce the armor itself by 1. And if you reduce the armor to 0, it just dissolves. So again, let's say we're fighting a creature that has a lot of metal armor. It's not particularly tough in terms of the damage output, but it's really hard to hit. Like, it's just shrugging off blows. Your rogue's daggers are just bouncing against its armor, and your fighter's hammer is just bouncing off it, and both are just like, I just can't get a hit on this guy. Even when I hit him, it feels like he doesn't feel it. Well, you can be the one who's just like, okay, let's use my turns to dissolve that armor. So now we reduce the armor by 1. Suddenly your rogue's daggers are finding some of those little rust holes. The fighter his hammer is finding, a bit of those rust gaps, or is catching the parts that are no longer quite as slick and smooth. They've got a bit more texture to them, so the hammer surface has something to grip onto when he puts the force behind it. That adds like a lot of versatility, and characters that have the ability. I just like characters that let the players be creative, be adventurous, be clever. There is definitely something to be said about certain TTRPGs that are very, you spend your turn hitting them, they spend their turn hitting you, bonk, 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 and that's just the fight. And some people enjoy that. Some people enjoy watching big number, especially people that are using big weapons, great axes, great swords. But there are people who would prefer to be clever. The character that sets up very specific things like, ooh, if I use this turn for this, I can use this turn for this, which will let either the character themselves or a different character set up, like, ooh, I'm going to use a thing that exposes an enemy's weakness, and even though I don't do any damage this round, everybody else will do more damage. Or somebody who is good at grappling can be like, ooh, I'm going to use my grappling powers to put the bad guy on his back on the floor. I didn't do any damage that round, but our opponent's on his back now. So now all of a sudden he has disadvantages that gives everybody else an advantage. Or potentially somebody can take away an advantage of an opponent. The opponent is hitting really well, like nothing they do seems to be able to dodge their attacks. And then someone's like, I'm going to spend my turn blinding the opponent. And now they have a much harder time hitting everybody. I like when people have the opportunity to be like, no, I'm not just going to go for big damage number. Like, I'm not looking for big red number. I'm looking for ways to benefit us as a group in a way that is not just damage dealing. Because there's something to be said. There's an argument in Dungeons and Dragons, or in a lot of TTRPGs, when it comes to healing, where it's like, well, you don't have to heal if your enemy can't hit you anymore, There's the idea of that you can build a healer that's really powerful healing, and you can make the argument of just like, well, your character's useless if we can knock out the enemy before they can hit us. And there is some thought process to that, right? Like, I don't think that's wrong, but there's more than one way to avoid damage. It's not just about negating the damage through healing, but it's also not just about knocking your opponent out before they can knock you out. There's, again, blindness, there's deafening, there's positioning, there's, again, putting an opponent in a position where they are at a disadvantage, putting them on their back, putting their back against a wall, putting debuffs on them like poisons and blinding and all other sorts of things. I think I'm talking about this a little bit too much. This is just stuff that I enjoy personally, where you just get to dive into the ideas of being a player and adjusting the world accordingly. And this is all for this. I understand that this chat was a little bit more combat oriented, which wasn't completely the intention, just that's usually where the stuff is like readily and easily noticeable. You know, like if you get a +2 to hit, you know what that's going to do for you combat wise. But if you get an ability where you can summon a little hand that can pick up 5 pounds maximum, you can't really be like, well, what does that do in combat? It's like, well, nothing. It doesn't hit. It can't hit. It can only hold 5 pounds. And it's like, yeah, sure, but before combat, can I make the little hand pull the arrows out of the quiver of the enemy archer that we just spotted? Or can we use it instead of ourselves to pull that lever on the other side of the room, just in case it causes a trap to activate? Or can I use it as a little side performance as a bard? Can I use that as a part of my little performance where it doesn't actually do anything monetarily or combat wise or stats wise, but it adds flavor to your character? You know, here's Barnaby and his magical little hand performing some kind of tune, you know, so that he can simultaneously juggle with one hand while also playing a lute, because the little hand is playing part of the music while he's juggling with a single hand. I gotta get back to grabbing the cloth on my lap. I definitely just let go of it. And I hope that the little clicks didn't come through. I definitely heard them, and that's what made me realize, oh, I'm talking with my hands again. Ah, well. I think that is enough for today. I will do a couple of those nice ASMR words before we sign off. And I know that one of the nice ones is sleep, 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 sleep. I do actually really like the sound of sleep. I like the way that you said that people say sleep. It just makes the mouth make very specific sounds, which I think is kind of unique from other words. I hope that you guys enjoyed listening today. I hope that you get good rest. I hope that your week or weekend is treating you well, whatever time it might happen to be for you. Whatever time you go to sleep, I hope that you have very wonderful dreams, that you wake up rested and refreshed and able to take on the day, whatever you might need to take on. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you the next time that I see you. Bye-bye for now. Appreciate you very much. Bye-bye.